Good morning, everybody. My name is Chad Kaplan, and on behalf of CCOM G1 here at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, we would like to welcome you to this afternoon's FERS webinar with federal benefits educators. It is being led by Mr. Walt Ward, a field trainer with FBE, who previously worked for DoD as a project manager and systems administrator. Also assisting with today's presentation and moderation of questions is both Mr. Fred Kreutzer and Mr. Freddie Kreutzer of Kreutzer Financial Services here in Bel Air, Maryland. We have had the pleasure at CCOM of working with both FBE and Kreutzer Financial Services on many occasions, and due to COVID-19, this is our first time having a seminar online with the MS Teams platform. Therefore, at the conclusion of today's presentation and Q&A session, please take a couple of minutes to fill out the survey that will be provided in the text box, letting us know how you enjoyed today's session. For those who are not part of CCOM, you may or may not be able to access the link, but please try if you are able to do so. Additionally, we will be sharing a link shortly from FBE that includes both a survey and form to fill out if interested in a follow-up complimentary individual consultation and retirement assessment with FBE. Please note, government is not responsible for any costs, if applicable, incurred by an individual who contacts this vendor or any other outside vendor. Lastly, we want to thank Mr. Eric Manansala and the CCOM G6 team for producing the webinar. Without their help, these events would have been capped at a much smaller number. With that being said, I will now turn it over to FBE. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Welcome everybody for joining us today, for especially you FERS participants on your pre-retirement benefits. We're going to handle a lot of topics here today. First off, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Fred Kreutzer IV. I've been a financial advisor for 31 years. My son Freddie works with me as well. He's been here for 4 years. My father was a financial advisor for 37 years. So we have a lot of years of doing this. The good thing about most people like it from APG is we're local. We're in Bel Air, been here for 18 years, and we love servicing our federal employees. That is our forte, is working with federal employees. Next slide, Walt. Want to let you know that I am sponsoring today's event, and we are going to have Walt Ward, who will be speaking after me. Walt is a specialist. He goes and speaks actually all over the United States. He is actually going through our meeting today through our Microsoft Teams, but he is not, nor am I, are we affiliated in any way with the federal government. I am his sponsor. I am the local representative who looks after his process. Next slide. What you want to take over from here? You're not on, Walt. You're on mute, Walt.
Still muted, Walt.
Still muted, Walt.
Am I unmuted now?
Now you're unmuted.
Okay. Take 3. So this is our benefit, our disclosure right here. We're not affiliated, endorsed, or sponsored by the federal government in any way, shape, or form. This next slide is as an instructor. Again, I'm not affiliated, or endorsed, or sponsored by the government. What Fred and I do together we basically fulfill a 2004 congressional mandate that stipulated that HR agencies on an annual basis train their employees on financial literacy and federal benefits annually. However, this mandate came with it unfunded, so no money was attached to it, and agencies had to take it out of high. So what they did to make up for the shortfall is they created websites like OPM, so OPM web pages. So on the weekends, that's when federal employees can go in and learn about their benefits. Well, who does that? So what we do is we fill in the gap there. We provide you what your benefits are going to be, and Fred provides you your financial literacy to help you walk through the sometimes confusing maze of all of your federal benefits and how to make sense of them and how to maximize them. A little bit about myself is I'm retired GS-13 from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, as I was Air Force DoD. I retired October 1st, 2014. It'll be 6 years and 2 weeks. Wow. I had over 36 plus years of service. And some of the things I want to talk about today is I've actually done myself. So I've not only talked the talk, but I've walked the walk. So I've actually sold back military time, and I've sold back sick leave. I've taken advantage of basic insurance, free, mind you, and option A, and we'll show you how you can get those as well. So when we go on here, so the next slide here is, right. So here's our today's agenda. We're going to talk about the pre-retirement accumulation. Fred's going to cover Social Security, thrift savings and Social Security, and I'll talk about the FERS. Those three pieces comprise your working years. So those are your wealth accumulation years. Once you've got your wealth accumulated, the trick in retirement is keep what you have, right? So in retirement, it's not about wealth accumulation, it's about wealth preservation. And the best way to preserve wealth in retirement is two ways: life insurance, health insurance. So we'll run down the list here, and we'll talk about all these things. How's your life, how does your acronyms, your Federal Employees Group Life Insurance work? Your number one benefit is your health care. How does disability work? Fred will talk a little bit about long-term care for wealth preservation. And then I'll hit hard about survivor benefits, because that's a big deal. Without survivor benefits, your spouse is left without income and health care for life upon death of the federal employee. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kruger right now to go into your TSP highlights. And this is over to you, Fred.
Thank you. Well, folks, let's first understand what our TSP allows us to do. This is going to be the numbers that you're allowed. If you're under the age of 50, TSP allows you to put up to, in a given year, $19,500. Now, if you're over the age of 50, we're allowed to do an additional $6,500, which gives us a total, we're allowed to put up to $26,000 of our income. That catch-up provision is in there for those who maybe while we raised their children, we could put in as much as we wanted. Now our incomes are a little higher, the kids might be on their own. They're giving you a chance to play a little bit more catch-up to get to where you want to be in retirement. The contributions you make, you have a choice. And this is something that we really talk about with all our clients and making sure you're making the right choices. You can do it all pre-tax, which is what we call traditional. And you can do it post-tax, which would be Roth contributions. Or you can do a mixture of both. But that is the maximum dollars you can put away. The number one rule for every federal employee, as long as I've been working with you folks, is to always do a minimum of 5%. And why do we want to do 5%? They're going to match you 100% up to your first 5%. That means literally, you got to keep this in mind. For every day you drive out of your driveway and you put up 5%, they're matching you 100% return. There's no place in this world that you can give somebody an investment and quickly turn 100% return on a dollar. But TSP gives you that up to 5%. When the actual employers in most private industry, 3% is usually the norm. So you're very lucky that you have the provision to put up to 5 and get matched, but you're also even luckier that they give you the Roth option, because a lot of private employers do not do that. It's only payroll deduction only how the money can go into your TSP plan. Next slide, please. TSP highlights, we talk about Roth contributions. Most of us drank the Kool-Aid, and we're going to be in a lower tax bracket later in life. Well, basically, when we put the TSP traditional, because it's coming out pre-tax, for every $25 you put away, it really only costs you $18 in your pocket. But at the end, all those dollars that you put away got pre-tax, as well as all the earnings and accumulation. When we take them out, they're 100% taxable. So now we may be in a higher tax bracket because our distributions coming out of our IRA might be more than that we really want them to be. So, when we put that in there for the right reasons, which was pre-tax benefits, we don't know what the taxes are going to be in the future. I think most of us would agree we're at a very low tax rate today, but with all this pandemic and COVID, we're giving out trillions of dollars. Somebody's going to have to pay that back. It usually comes in the form of taxes down the road. So maybe we look at doing Roth as an option with you, having sit down with you to navigate where you should be in that contribution of now. Next slide, please. So let's have an understanding here is if you put away a salary and you have $76,000, you can put up to the whole 26 if you're over the age of 50. But remember, all those dollars are taxable. Then you look at the Roth side over here, and especially if you're someone of youth, someone who's only 20, 30, maybe 40 years of age, you've got the next 20, 30 years for this money to grow and compound. We really got to think, is the tax break that significant now that I would have paid tax on that plus all the interest I'm going to earn in the next 30, 40 years? As a financial planner, if you're young, it really doesn't make sense that you want to pay all those taxes down the road. But again, you're going to have a less of a paycheck because when we do put into the Roth, that means you're not getting that $7 saving for every $25 you put away. But if you look at the big picture, what are the benefits down the road? Now, always keep this in mind. No matter what you put in, whether you put it to the traditional or you put it to the Roth, the match will always, always, always go into TSP traditional. Because the government gets a break on that. What are they looking for is down the road, they're going to get your tax dollars. Next slide, please. Well, we just had a new ruling called the Secure Act 2020. And you may not think this affects you, but not only may it affect you, but it may affect your mom and dad, or an aunt or uncle, or a friend that you know that's senior, who's retired somewhere. So the changes happened in a couple things. This happened in January of this year. They changed the required minimum distribution. It used to be at 70 and a half, you had to start taking out a minimum distribution out of your traditional IRAs. Well, that changed to 72. Now, if you were already 70 and a half when 2020 happened, you still have got to maintain your minimum distributions. That does not change for you. But if you're not at 72, you can defer it till 72 now before you have to take distributions. So what does that do? That allows you a little bit more saving ability, Roth planning ability. That gives you 2 more years for your money to grow, but it also allows you, possibly if you're in that retirement phase, that you might want to start looking at what a conversion can do. Now, what is a conversion? Well, when you take money out of a traditional and you put it to a Roth, that means we have a taxable event. Even if you didn't take it in your hands, we got to pay tax on it. But there are some neat things that happened this year that it may be good for you to look into at this stage. But the good thing is we can convert that over so the future growth can grow tax-free. The biggest part of understanding TSP and why is it that a lot of our folks like to start pulling money out at 59 and a half and put it into an IRA on the outside is because of the stretch IRA that's allowed outside. So let's think we're a husband and wife and we're 60 years of age and we have $500,000 in our TSP. Well, the husband dies, no big issue. That money transfers to the spouse. She has the same rulings as the husband who worked there. She can wait till age 72 to start her distributions. But now what happens is something happens to mom. And let's assume that they have 2 kids. Well, what's the taxable event to the 2 kids? Well, how about 100% taxable? So we got $500,000, and this is no different, folks. So if you have a 401k from a previous employer, a 403b, a 457 from a previous employer, do know that they also have the same implications because it's called an employer-sponsored plan. They will work with your spouse, but they do not work with your children. Yet, if it's in an IRA, and this is why some of the planning we do is putting money in an IRA, even if you're not retired yet, if something happens to mom and dad and it's in an IRA, your children have options. I like to believe that we all like options in everything we do. Your children do not have to now take that $500,000 in a lump sum they can take it over a 10-year period of time, and thus it minimizes the taxes that you're going to give to the government. The government would probably love you just to leave it where it's at or in a 401k because it becomes a big tax implication when mom and dad are not here. So you might even have parents who said, boy, Fred, they left it in their 401k. Well, I would say you need to call me and sit down with mom and dad and educate them why they should not have left their 401k at their employer. That it should be put into an IRA to stay at that point. So you as the children, like I want for my children, is to have that option not to give the biggest benefit to the government through tax. Next slide, please. So what is the minimum distribution? We get this question a lot. So if you were 70 and a half prior to now having to take it at 72, the minimum distribution is you take your December 31st value and you divide it by the factors that you see here on the slide. So at 72, basically, you're pulling out about 4% to satisfy the required minimum distributions. Now, it's important, whoever you are, or who you want to work with, that you work with someone who's going to make sure you take out the proper minimum distributions. Why is that? You'll see the right-hand side says potential 50% tax penalty. If you are supposed to take out $6,000, but you only took out $3,000, the $3,000 you should have taken out as well, you were taxed at a 50% penalty on what you're supposed to do. So sometimes navigating that on your own might not always be the best method. It's probably best that you're working with someone to make sure these factors are done properly. We don't want to make a mistake and give anybody 50% on monies. Next slide, please. So what are your investment options? So let's understand what the government gives you as an option. The first one we'll talk about is the G fund, which most of you are very familiar with. It's very similar to a money market. It's not going to be exciting, but you know you cannot lose money. So in the first 3 months this year, when the pandemic hit, you saw the stock market get smacked around, and a lot of us lost about 30% at that point in time. If you had any monies in the G fund, you did not lose a penny. Now, you might only be making right now about 1.8%, but you have no fear of losing money. The other category right underneath that is the F fund. The F fund is going to be government, corporate, and mortgage-backed bonds. Well, bonds do good when interest rates go down, but what happens to bonds when bond interest rates go up? Bonds generally go down a little bit. Now, they will never lose you 30% in a bad year. Bonds are not that risky. That's why they're right underneath the G as far as the risk level. But can you lose money in the F fund? Absolutely, but you just won't get crushed. So you have the potential to make a little bit more than the G on an average, but you do have loss possibilities. And then we go to the one a lot of people are in. That's called the C fund. The C fund is a composite of the 500 largest companies in America. Now, how your fund managers manage that is they have an absolute equal percentage across the board in all 500 companies. So it's not what we like to call on the outside a truly managed fund, which means if they think Amazon is going to do better than BP stock, they can't shift a higher percentage in that Apple stock because they've got to be equal across the board. So sometimes it can do better than the indexes on the outside, sometimes it can do worse. If we look back to 2008, what happened to the C fund? Well, it lost 38% that year. So if we're near retirement, do we want to have everything in the C fund? Absolutely not. We don't want to take a chance of losing 38%. But it has the longest growth potential. Out of all 5 funds, the C fund has been the best performer over the longevity of all these years. The S fund is representing small to medium-sized companies in America as well. Now keep in mind when we talk about the C fund, 88% of the S&P 500 do have international exposure. So we'll get into the I fund in a little bit and whether or not you need that. but you do have international exposure in that C fund. The S fund is going to be a little bit more volatile because it's going to be buying companies that are small, which is like an Under Armour. They're nowhere in comparison to a Nike, but they're a good company. Well, what happened to Under Armour 2 years ago? They lost over 70%. So they had 23 great quarters, and just like that, as they were trying to really get to the next level, Under Armour took a big hit. Well, small company, there is higher risk of that happening than a blue chip C fund. So a little bit higher risk. And that's international. So the companies that they buy are not based here in the United States. They are based overseas. Most of them are in Europe. That would be the mainstay of most of that, Japan. But there are countries that they do not get involved in. I wouldn't have a large percentage there. Over the last 10 years, iFund is not one of the better performers. When you see the C fund or the S fund, I think you're in a better situation. That said, you still might want to have a little something in that area. Let's look at lifestyle funds, one. So lifestyle funds is for those who really don't want to think too much about what percentage they should have in those 5 categories. Now the L funds are those 5 categories, but they're simply put into an age group where the risk will be the tolerance of that year that you're going to retire. So someone says, Fred, I'm going to put all my eggs in 2065. 2 things we think of. This is somebody who's very young. It means they got a lot of years and they can handle a lot of risk. Now, in that L60 2065, more likely than not, it's probably all C, S, and I funds. And then we take the flip side, we go, what would be in the 2025 fund? Well, that's assuming that you plan to retire in the next 5 years. So what the L funds do is they're minimizing your risk as you get closer to that age. So if you don't want to worry about trying to pick your percentages, move your money around, an L fund can be a great option for you. But an L2025 fund means you're going to have a lot of F, a lot of G, and maybe a little bit of C, but probably not much S and I. So it's not going to be that aggressive. But that's how the L funds work. And they're all cookie cutter. As you get closer to that year, they automatically go into certain percentages in those 5 categories. Next slide, please. So with your TSP, you have some options. Some options have just recently changed, which was in the year of 2019. Believe it or not, for the first time, before 2019, if you were over the age of 59 and a half, you were allowed 1 in-service withdrawal during the entire time you were over 59 and a half to retirement. Well, that changed. Now you can do up to 4 times. You can make actions to move money out, take a withdrawal over the age of 59 and a half. That's a great option because it allows you to have more control of where your money is and where it goes. Because you may like investment options on the outside. Before, you could only do it 1 time between 59 and a half and retirement. So the door is opened up a little bit to give us more options. There's other things that are allowable in your TSP. The first one is a loan. And the way you repay a loan is through your payroll deduction. You pay yourself back, but remember this, your money is out of the market. So if you took out $50,000 and you're paying it back over 5 years, that $50,000, the stock market's roaring, does not get the benefit of compounding of that 5 years. We really try to discourage anybody, unless it's a last-ditch effort, to borrow money out of a retirement plan, because we've never met anybody in the day of retirement who said, I have too much money. So sometimes you've got to be careful that we don't just take it because we can, we do it because it makes sense. Hardship withdrawals. They cannot be repaid, and they must be approved by the government. If they approve it, that money's out of there. Unfortunately, when you take withdrawal, you will pay a 10% penalty in addition to the federal tax and the state tax. That would only be a last-ditch effort if you're in financial disarray that you would have to use that. But it is an option. Next slide, please. So you have a couple different options if you left your money within TSP. You can take a fixed amount every month that you elect as an income. You can do a life expectancy amount. But you'll see all the time that on the right-hand side, you'll see this annuity income option. So when you print your TSP papers in the right-hand corner at the bottom, it tells you about how much money is projected you will get every month if you're retired at a certain age. Well, what that refers to is a thing called a Metropolitan Life single premium immediate annuity. So the number sounds wonderful, but if you understand what a single premium annuity is, most likely it's not going to be a direction you want to go in. Well, why do I say that? Let's say we have $500,000, and it's going to give you $2,000 a month. As long as you're alive, you get that check. So if you're 58 and you live to 95, you get that check guaranteed for the rest of your life. But what if you die at age 60? What happens to your $500,000? It's gone. Metropolitan Life then becomes the beneficiary because you did a single premium immediate annuity, which is irreversible and irrevocable. I don't know a client of mine who doesn't want to have control over their monies while they're now working or even in retirement. So if we plan it properly, I think we can do a just job, but also make sure your beneficiaries will get something on all that hard-earned money you put away. Next slide, please. So we hear sometimes that, and I mentioned it in the very early part, is you can do a withdrawal after the age of 59 and a half. And we're going to address why that might be a possibility. Understand, how many options do we have at TSP? We have 5. And the lifestyle funds are a composite of those 5, period. So you're very limited in your investments, you have options there. But you got to be careful if you elect to do this, that you understand in the outside world, if I'm to move a 401k, if you have one, you said, Fred, move my 401k to an IRA. Or Fred, move my IRA to an IRA, we call it a rollover. Well, the federal government with TSP is not called a rollover. In fact, if you check a rollover, it will become a taxable event. So make sure you're working with someone who understands the federal guidelines and forms that there's no mistakes making when you want to put this into an IRA on the outside. So it's called a transfer. We don't usually like the word transfers with a 401k or an IRA because that's not a good event. It's a rollover. But the government, it is a transfer. So we got to make sure we check all the right boxes, that we don't make any mistakes. So we had a couple people last year that they had a financial person, I'll just say, they were at a bank, I won't give the bank's name, and the gentleman said, I'll take care of all the paperwork. Well, he did it, but he checked it off as a rollover. It became a taxable event for those folks. So being that I've been working with you folks up at APG for a number of years, I get a couple phone calls asking me if I could bail them out of the trouble. The answer is no. TSP, we sent letters to request that the error was not in the participant, it was in the error of the financial advisor. And you know what they asked the participant? Who signed the paper? So even though the advisor said, I got it, we're going to do it right, they signed the paper, so the ultimate risk was on them. So they had no recourse, and they had to add all that money they thought they were rolling it over as a taxable event. Next slide, please. So the Coronavirus CARES Act 2020 is so unique. It's never happened in my working years, I've been doing 31 years, that this kind of opportunity has opened up for those who may need a couple bucks. So the first one we want to address is it allows a defined contribution plan, such as TSP, to fund withdrawals up to $100,000. Any age. You could be 35 years of age. You go, Fred, I want to pull out $30,000. I want to put it down on a house. I understand I'm losing my future growth. There's no, look at line 2, there's no early withdrawal penalty in the year of 2020. Unbelievable. It's never happened before. I've been doing it 31 years that the government is not hitting you with a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So if you're thinking about it, talk to someone, myself or another financial advisor, before you make any of these actions. Understand what the loss of that $50,000 would be by taking it out for future growth. Is it really something you want to do? It also says it's going to waive the 20% withholding, and the taxable distribution, this is unbelievable, guys, you can spread it over 3 years. So if you took out 50, you do not have to claim